pilot's promotion party is for pilots, ma'am, not for administrative support. The sneer in Lieutenant Kyle Jensen's voice was as sharp as the crease in his new flight suit. The tight circle of young, swaggering aviators around him erupted in a wave of condescending laughter. It echoed off the polished wood and brass of the officers' club, a sound of arrogant belonging. The woman he addressed stood alone, just outside their circle of self-congratulation, a ghost at their feast of ego. She held a simple glass of water, her uniform a stark, unadorned service dress, the insignia on her collar that of a chief warrant officer, a rank that the commissioned pilots around her viewed with a mix of confusion and dismissal. She was older, perhaps in her late 40s, with threads of silver woven into the dark hair, pulled back in a severe regulation bun. Her face was a map of quiet experiences, her eyes calm, steady, and observant. They betrayed nothing. No anger, no embarrassment, no reaction at all to the public humiliation. She simply took a slow, deliberate sip of her water, her gaze sweeping over the boisterous crowd, not with judgment, but with a kind of detached analysis, as if she were assessing weather patterns or monitoring engine performance. Lieutenant Jensen, freshly pinned and basking in the glow of his promotion, saw only what he wanted to see: an aging, non-commissioned paper pusher who had wandered into a space reserved for the chosen few, the warriors of the sky. But when the base commander, General Thorne, glanced over from the far side of the room, he didn't see an administrator. He saw her stance, the subtle, perfect balance of a body that had spent 10,000 hours under extreme G-forces, and a cold knot of recognition tightened in his gut. If you believe that true respect is earned in silence, not shouted from a podium, type Guardian below. The young lieutenant, buoyed by the laughter of his peers, pressed his attack. He saw her silence not as strength, but as weakness, a confirmation of her irrelevance. Seriously, he continued, his voice loud enough for half the room to hear. Who let the clerks in? This is the Viper's nest tonight. You gotta have wings to fly with us. He puffed out his chest, a caricature of the fighter pilot archetype, all bravado and superficial confidence. The other pilots grinned, enjoying the show, their own insecurities momentarily soothed by the casual mockery of an outsider. The woman, Anya Sharma, did not flinch. She set her glass down on a nearby table, the movement economical and precise, placing it perfectly in the center of a small cork coaster. There was no tremor in her hand, no haste in her motion. Her world seemed to operate at a different frequency, a lower, calmer rhythm immune to the turbulent air of Jensen's arrogance. She turned her body slightly, directing her attention toward the large windows overlooking the main runway, her profile a study in stoic composure. The onlookers mistook her disengagement for defeat. They saw a woman who knew she was out of her place and was wisely retreating. What they could not comprehend was that she was not retreating at all. She was listening, not to the empty noise of the party, but to a deeper sound, a subtle change in the atmospheric hum of the airbase, a vibration that only a lifetime spent in the air could teach someone to feel. It was the faint, almost imperceptible prelude to chaos, and her entire being was already shifting from observation to readiness, a silent, internal checklist being methodically engaged while the children in uniform continued to laugh. Suddenly, the low hum of the party was shattered by the piercing shriek of a base-wide emergency siren. Red lights flashed across the club, painting the laughing faces in strokes of sudden panic. The jovial atmosphere evaporated, replaced by the electric tension of a real-world crisis. A distorted voice crackled over the club's integrated speaker system, the raw fear of the air traffic controller cutting through the static. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Falcon 2-1 declaring an emergency. Catastrophic engine failure. Total electrical loss. We're dead stick. I repeat, dead stick. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. A dead stick landing, a powerless glide to the runway, was a pilot's ultimate nightmare, a maneuver with a vanishingly small chance of success. To make matters worse, the controller's next words sent a chill through every aviator present. Be advised, crosswinds are at 30 knots, gusting to 45. Runway 27 is a wind shear nightmare, while the young pilots, including a now-pale Lieutenant Jensen, scrambled toward the windows or stood frozen in shock. Anya Sharma moved. She didn't run. She walked with a serene, unhurried purpose that seemed utterly alien to the chaos around her. Her path was a straight, efficient line toward a service door marked Tower Access. The narrator of the scene, had there been one, would have focused on her hands. They were steady, relaxed, her fingers not clenched in fear, but held with the calm readiness of a surgeon approaching the operating table. She was a picture of absolute competence in a room full of panicked bravado. The control tower was a scene of controlled pandemonium. Controllers barked information into headsets, their voices strained. The tower chief, a seasoned master sergeant, gripped his console, his knuckles white, his experience overwhelmed by the impossible situation unfolding on his screens. The F-16 was a silent predator falling from the sky, a metal dart at the mercy of gravity and a brutal, unforgiving wind. Lieutenant Jensen and his cohort had crowded onto the observation deck, their earlier arrogance replaced by a horrified fascination. They were watching two of their own face death. Into this maelstrom of fear and technology stepped Anya Sharma. She entered the room with the quiet authority of someone who owned the space, her presence a sudden, calming anchor. She didn't speak a word of introduction. She walked directly to the lead approach controller station, gently took the headset from the stunned airman, and slipped it on. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it cut through every other sound in the room, a perfect signal in a sea of noise. Falcon 2-1, this is Guardian. I have you. Stop listening to the tower. Listen only to me. The call sign, Guardian, was unfamiliar, unregistered, but the tone was one of absolute command. She began to speak, not guiding the crippled jet, but flying it by proxy. Your airspeed is 190. Too fast. Bleed it to 175. Gentle left rudder now to crab into the shear. More. Hold it there. I see the gust. Prepare for updraft in 3, 2, 1. Now, stick forward. Correct? It was an impossible display of skill, a direct, stunning refutation of the idea that she was just administrative support, the crippled fighter jet, against all laws of aerodynamics and luck, stabilized on its fatal descent, responding to her commands as if they were a physical force. The tower fell into a deafening silence. The only sound the calm, rhythmic cadence of her voice and the frantic heartbeats of everyone who was witnessing a miracle. The F-16 screamed over the threshold, slammed onto the runway with a shower of sparks from its landing gear, and screeched to a halt just feet from the end of the asphalt. A collective breath was released in the tower, a gasp of pure, unadulterated awe. Jensen stood paralyzed, his mouth agape. No way, he whispered, the words catching in his throat. That's not possible. Just as the emergency crews began to swarm the runway, the door to the control room swung open again. General Marcus Thorne, the base commander, strode in, his face a grim, unreadable mask. He was a man whose presence commanded instant respect, a veteran of countless conflicts who had seen everything the sky had to offer. His eyes scanned the room, passing over the frantic controllers, the stunned supervisors, and a cluster of wide-eyed young pilots on the observation deck. His gaze finally landed on Anya Sharma, who was calmly removing the headset, her work done. She placed it carefully back on its hook, the motion as precise as every other she had made. The general walked directly to her, his boots making a heavy, rhythmic sound on the linoleum floor. The entire room held its breath. He stopped a foot in front of her, but he didn't speak to her. He turned his head slightly toward the shell-shocked tower chief. Master Sergeant. His voice was a low growl of authority. Pull up the service record for Chief Warrant Officer 5, Anya Sharma. Display it on the main screen. Now the chief, fumbling with his keyboard, complied instantly. A personnel file blinked onto the massive central monitor, and a list of credentials began to scroll down the screen, each line more unbelievable than the last. The room was silent as he read the data aloud, his voice trembling with dawning comprehension. Name, Sharma, Anya. Rank, Chief Warrant Officer 5. Unit, Classified, Special Operations Command. Flight hours, 12,421. The list continued, a cascade of impossible achievements that left the audience breathless. Primary aircraft qualifications, all fixed-wing and rotary aircraft in the United States Air Force inventory. Special certifications, Chief Test Pilot, Skunk Works Division. Lead Instructor, USAF Weapons School. Program Lead, Project Chimera. At the mention of Project Chimera, a wave of shock rippled through the assembled pilots. It was a ghost program, a legend whispered about in hushed tones, a top-secret initiative that took the most elite aviators in the world and trained them to fly and recover aircraft from unsurvivable black swan events. It was the stuff of myths. The chief's voice faltered as he reached the final lines. Call sign, Guardian. Awards and decorations. Distinguished Flying Cross with 3 oak leaf clusters. The Air Medal with Valor Device. The McKay Trophy. He trailed off, unable to continue. General Thorne turned back to face Anya. He stood ramrod straight, his posture shifting from that of a commander to that of a subordinate. He brought his hand up in the sharpest, most profound salute of his career, a gesture of deep and unwavering respect reserved for true heroes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick with an emotion no one had ever heard from him before. "On behalf of the United States Air Force, thank you. You just saved 2 of my officers and a $100 million asset." The word ma'am, directed from a 3-star general to a warrant officer, was a deliberate and powerful breach of protocol, a public declaration that the rules of rank and hierarchy were utterly irrelevant in the face of her demonstrated mastery. He then let his salute drop and turned his hard, unforgiving eyes on the crowd, his gaze locking onto a ghostly white Lieutenant Jensen. "Let this be a lesson for every single person in this room." Thorne's voice was low, but it carried the weight of thunder. You look at a uniform, and you make assumptions. You see quietness, and you call it weakness. You saw an administrator. I saw the pilot who wrote the book on dead-stick landings. Literally, Chief Sharma is the reason we have an emergency procedure for this at all. She doesn't wear her legacy on her sleeve because it's written in every flight manual on this base. It is etched into the very sky above our heads. Do you understand me? The story of the Guardian of the Tower became legend before the sun set that day. It spread from the control room to the flight line, from the maintenance bays to the barracks, and finally, through secure channels, to air bases across the globe. The quiet warrant officer who had talked a crippled fighter jet down from the heavens became an instant folk hero. The audio recording of her calm, precise instructions during the incident was classified, but transcripts, redacted and anonymized, were disseminated to every flight school and training squadron. It became the new gold standard for crisis communication, a perfect example of grace under unimaginable pressure. For Lieutenant Jensen, the event was a brutal, public crucible. His arrogance was burned away, leaving behind a raw and profound humility. The next morning, he found Anya Sharma not in an office, but in a hangar, dressed in simple coveralls, personally supervising the repair of the very F-16 she had saved. He approached her tentatively, the swagger gone from his walk, the sneer absent from his face. "Ma'am," he began, his voice barely a whisper. There are no words. What I said last night. It was arrogant and ignorant and unforgivable. I am truly sorry." He stood before her, fully prepared for a reprimand, for the career-ending rebuke he so richly deserved. His apology was sincere, born from the shattering of his entire worldview. He had built his identity on the idea of being an elite pilot, only to witness a level of skill he could not even comprehend from someone he had dismissed as insignificant. Anya Sharma slowly looked up from the exposed hydraulic lines of the aircraft's landing gear. She wiped a streak of grease from her cheek with the back of her hand, her calm eyes meeting his. There was no anger in them, no hint of triumph or satisfaction. There was only a quiet, patient understanding. She simply nodded. "We all make assumptions, Lieutenant," she said, her voice even and soft. The important thing is to be willing to see when we are wrong. Lesson learned. Now, focus on what matters. She didn't dwell on his apology or her vindication. Instead, she gestured toward the damaged landing gear. Pride will ground you faster than any mechanical failure. You see this actuator? It's a quarter-inch off tolerance. That's what almost killed them. The small details you overlook are the ones that create catastrophes. In that moment, she seamlessly transitioned from the subject of his disrespect to a mentor, using the wreckage of his ego as a teachable moment about the aircraft. She offered him not scorn, but knowledge. Her competence was so profound, her professionalism so absolute, that she had no need for retribution. Her only concern was the mission, the aircraft, and the pilot standing before her. Later that week, a small, unofficial ceremony took place. The two pilots she had saved, their faces etched with gratitude, presented her with a custom-engraved piece of the F-16's damaged fuselage, mounted on a wooden plaque. It read simply, "To Guardian, thank you for our wings." The console she had used in the tower was quietly designated the Guardian seat by the controllers, a small, reverent tribute to the miracle they had all witnessed. A year passed. The incident, far from fading into memory, became part of the base's institutional identity. The story was told to every new airman, every fresh-faced lieutenant who arrived with more ego than experience. It was a mandatory lesson in humility, a powerful parable about the vast difference between perceived status and actual worth. The culture had subtly but irrevocably shifted. There was a new respect for the quiet professionals, the seasoned sergeants and warrant officers who were the true repositories of institutional knowledge. The young pilots learned to listen more, to seek out the wisdom of the enlisted crews who knew the aircraft not from a manual, but from a lifetime of hands-on experience. Captain Kyle Jensen, his promotion now a year old, was a different man. He was a better pilot, more precise and more daring, but he was a far better officer. He was known for his quiet demeanor, his thoughtful questions, and his unwavering respect for the maintenance teams. He often quoted the lesson he had learned in the harshest way possible. Focus on the aircraft, not the pilot. He never forgot the woman who had taught him that lesson, not with a reprimand, but with an act of impossible grace. Anya Sharma remained unchanged. She was still a quiet presence on the base, often seen in a hangar or on the flight line, her hands dirty, her focus absolute. She deflected all praise, turning any conversation about the incident back to the performance of the airframe or the courage of the pilots she had saved. She continued her work in the shadows, testing the limits of new technologies, writing the procedures that would save future lives, and mentoring the next generation not with speeches, but with her silent, unwavering example. Her legacy was not in the medals she kept locked away or the stories that were told about her. Her legacy was in the living, breathing culture of competence and mutual respect that now permeated the base. It was in the young captain who now treated every airman as a teacher, in the controllers who approached every emergency with a new sense of calm, and in the unspoken understanding that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you overlook. True authority, the base had learned, isn't announced with a loud voice or displayed with shiny insignia. It is forged in the silent hours of relentless practice, proven in the crucible of crisis, and carried with a humility so profound that it requires no external validation whatsoever. It's the quiet professional, the silent guardian, who holds the world together while others are busy talking about it. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where true strength defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.